Hey guys, this is Brian from Epicski.com. One of the things I wanted to talk to you today is about incorporating speed into some of your training. One of the questions that's been posed a couple times in private messages lately is, well, what do I do for the best exercise? Or, what's the quickest exercise that's going to get me back to my skiing? Skiing is one of these really weird gravity sports in that it's really hard to train for, but it's really easy to get hurt. This time of year we're about a month out and nobody really thinks about how we're going to train to get ourselves up to skiing speed. One of the videos you're going to see is me running at about 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes pace. That equates to about a little bit faster than a 10-minute mile. What you'll notice in that video is that I'm doing about 10 miles an hour, and you're going to see a lot of action with the feet, and you're going to see a lot of action with specifically the dorsiflexors that we're going to talk about today. Now, our prime dorsiflexor is the tibialis anterior, and there's going to be a link to a picture of what the tibia anterior does, and we're going to talk about why that's important in speed training. Conservatively speaking, slalom skiing happens at about anywhere between 20, 30, 35 miles an hour. When you're out ripping around just cruising, you might be hitting that 30 plus mile an hour limit. We do absolutely no training at 30 miles an hour on dry land. So one of the things that I'm really a giant advocate for is really thinking of your legs as a spring and really working those ankle muscles. And I think the best way to do that is to get in some speed training or some running. I'm a big fan of going out and running on the trails. I think it's a great way to kind of work that tibialis anterior to kind of really make sure that your ankle's pumping up and down. What you're going to see if you look at some of the EMG studies and look at the muscular activity of running and trail running, that tibialis anterior is almost constantly active. It's either eccentrically getting ready to prepare for what's going to happen when the foot hits the ground, or it's concentrically starting to contract as we get into our swing phase. One of the things that comes up all the time is that, well, I'm not comfortable running, or, running is not something I'm interested in. If you really look at some of the research and what's out there, running is safe if you're doing it in a good progression. Certainly starting out at a fair amount of speed is something that you don't necessarily have to do, but if you really want to work that tibialis anterior, one of the best ways to do it is to get into some running shoes. What we've got here is this is actually a Newton, and the Newton whole concept on these guys is they've actually got some lugs on the bottom which are designed to kind of propel you forward. Again, constantly thinking about that ankle as eccentric, concentric propulsion as you're going forward. You see the same thing happen in skiing. As many of you guys know, I'm a big fan of the full tilt boot line. And this isn't to turn this into a full tilt advertisement, but I really like the way that I can take my dorsiflexors and I can twist the tongue a lot so that I can get myself constantly centered. One of the things that happens quite a bit is people get that backward drifting sensation right before they get hurt or they get back on their tails. With your anterior shin muscles, those dorsiflexors, you're constantly pulling yourself into a better position. So you're pulling yourself forward, pulling yourself into that next turn. And I really think that in a lot of my skiing and a lot of the work that I do with the athletes that I'm getting ready to ski or I'm getting back to ski, I'm really working on that dorsiflexor, eccentric, concentric action. A lot of the stuff I see posted on the websites has people doing very slow, very deliberate, very skillful drills on things like Bosu balls or foam and whatnot. And what I want to kind of pose to you guys today is that if it's done in a safe way, one of the things you can do is take that training and bring it up to speed a little bit. Certainly if you're training at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 miles per hour, it's going to translate a little bit better to your skiing than if you're standing on a static Bosu ball. So I want to show you some clips, show you some things of what it looks like to actually get up to speed, and then talk about the progression in this thread. Certainly you don't have to go out and run a 5K to make it worth your while. We'll talk about strides. Strides are anywhere from 20 to 30 yards worth of throwing some runs in there. You can work on speeding up. You can work on slowing down. Again, great eccentric, decentric control of how we're working that tibialis anterior muscle. There's a lot more that goes into it, but think of your legs as kind of springs, and their propulsion is for getting you to go forward. You see a lot of that happen in skiing where you're constantly absorbing the shock of the terrain, you're constantly absorbing the shock of getting into the turn, getting out of the turn. And what I want to kind of spur in this conversation is how do we do that? How do we get us up to speed, not just for training, but also for skiing? Because certainly there's going to be a few of us on the forum that if we're skiing well, are going to be probably at the 40 mile an hour range. We're not going to see a lot of people hitting the 60, 70 mile an hour that the world covers are doing, but you're going to see it's coming close. There's a lot of GPS tracking data out there now, even with your iPhone or your watch. You can track how fast you're skiing. So when you're on the hill this year, take a look at what some of those cruiser runs are doing, because you'll see that you'll be getting up there north of 20 miles an hour. And I want you to think about, are you training anywhere near that level? So what I would advocate for is, a progression where we're really working on making sure the foot is ready for the speeds we're going to hit when we're hitting the snow. As you're hitting the ground, you're working on slowly lowering the foot to the ground in that anticipatory manner. You're then raising the foot off the ground. The ankle muscles, that tibialis anterior, is going to propel forward as we hit the flight phase of our running. So you don't have to become a 5K or a 10K champ, but I want people to give some consideration into, how do we incorporate this into our daily routine so that we're getting out there and doing some speed training a couple times a week. A really easy way to make sure that we're working those front tib muscles is to just get some TheraBand, and get this at a therapist's place, or get this, from your trainer, and just loop a TheraBand easily around the shoe. You can work this hundreds of times a day as you're sitting at your office surfing on Epicski. So give this some consideration. A little bit of TheraBand training, a little bit of sprints, a little bit of strides. Maybe you can get out there and do a 5K. But certainly working on how that ground force reaction dynamic occurs on dry land is going to help you when you're up to speed, skiing at 20, 30, 40 miles an hour. I hope this has been helpful, and hopefully this stimulates some good discussion. There's some pictures of me here jumping a picnic table, and while people certainly wouldn't go out and advocate for jumping a picnic table, how many of you guys are looking to launch into a cooler, in not too many weeks' time? So give that a thought, and maybe build up to launching some tables. Thanks, and have a great day, guys.